reported today in The Verge. How the PlayStation's DualShock shaped modern controllers. If you were told to draw a video game controller, what would it look like? Odds are, you'd scribble a rectangle with two downward wings for your palms to grip, a D-pad, 4 face buttons, shoulder triggers, and a pair of thumbsticks. In other words, you'd draw a PlayStation controller. Sony didn't invent the controller, but it did essentially invent modern controller design, shaping the look and ergonomics of how we've interacted with games for over 2 decades. There's plenty of credit to award when it comes to video game controller design. Nintendo pioneered the core button layout with the SNES, D-pad on one side, face buttons on the other, and both Nintendo and Sega beat Sony to shipping an analog thumbstick for their consoles. But ultimately, it's Sony's innovations and ideas that would go on to become the elemental base of what we think of as a video game controller. There are 2 pioneering parts to Sony's foundation of the modern controller. First is the original PlayStation controller that launched in 1994, which would establish the broad design, elongated palm grips, shoulder buttons, and the D-pad, face button combination. And then there's the dual analog controller from 1997, followed by the more well-known DualShock models, which would change 3D games forever by offering a second analog stick, one to control a character and one to look around. Let's start with the basic design. Before Sony, video game controllers came in all shapes and sizes, from the rectangular NES pad to the Sega Genesis and its massive triplet buttons to whatever the Atari Jaguar was trying to do. Then came the PlayStation controller. After it, there's a whole bunch of controllers that just look like the PlayStation controller. It's a clear demarcation line for controller design. And yes, we've still seen some controllers break from Sony's overall shape, like the motion-controlled Wii Remote. But after generations of experimentation, with different game companies all trying to solve the problem of what makes a good controller, nearly all of the successful controllers to date are based on Sony's original design. The other massive advance that Sony brought to the PlayStation controller came later, with the dual analog controller in 1997. Games were just starting to make the jump to 3D with the PlayStation and the Nintendo 64, and it was clear that a new control solution was needed. The D-pad alone wasn't going to cut it anymore. Nintendo saw some success with the N64's single joystick, but it wasn't until Sony's dual analog controller came around that the final piece of the modern controller would be invented, the twin-stick setup. It would still take time for games and the industry to adapt to what Sony had started here, but the DualShock's basic inputs a 4-face button. For more on this story, visit the news article link.